As the days quickly turn colder, my toddler is in desperate need of winter coat. So what do we do in a crafting home? We sew a coat, of course. I have long loved the fashion of the mid-Victorian to early Edwardian eras, as I grew up watching the 1985 version of Anne of Green Gables. I would like to dress my toddler in historically inspired clothing as well. That being said, my inspiration for this project is a coat in the Met collection dated between 1895 and 1905. The construction looked simple enough. I thought that if I was able to draft the medic coat from TF2, then surely I could figure out something similar to this Victorian children's coat. However, I did not want to spend days drafting from scratch and fitting mock-ups to my toddler, so I came up with the genius idea of using the front, back, and sleeve pieces of the button-up shirt pattern from my other project. All I had to do was lengthen the pieces so that the coat would fall to his knees or lower. I also want to add a hood instead of the collar to keep him extra cozy this winter. After tracing out the pattern pieces, I lengthened them to 24 inches from center back, careful to follow the slight curve at the side seams. I decided to use this thin wool plaid that I picked up during the first lockdown of the plague. I had already made a walking skirt with it, and I thought it would be cute if my son's coat matched my skirt. Once my pieces were cut out, I traced out the back piece first along the fold in my fabric, then one of the front pieces and the sleeves. I cut away the piece that the sleeves were on so that I could open the fabric and perfectly match the stripes on the other side of the back. I didn't want to risk the fabric shifting while cutting it folded, resulting in mismatched lines along the back. I then very carefully matched several points of the second front piece to those of the already marked first front piece. I love working with plaid because it makes pattern matching so much easier than floral or abstract fabrics. Let's take a moment to admire the stripe placement on the back piece. There is a thin gold line going directly down center back, and the two thick gold lines coming down from the shoulders. After double checking that the lines of the front pieces matched, I began cutting them out. Just listen to the beautiful sound of my 60-year-old shears cutting through the wool. I had originally bought this brown silk thread to make my walking skirt, and I have just enough left to complete this project. At this point, my toddler woke up from his nap and insisted on being glued to my lap. I would soon find out that it is because he doesn't feel well. From this point on, I had to work in small batches as I dealt with a vomiting toddler. I started by attaching the front and back pieces at the shoulder, then I folded over and stitched the cuffs on the sleeves. I pressed open the shoulder seams, then used pinking shears to trim the seam allowance. I would do this for the entire coat since I learned with my walking skirt that this wool is too thick for felt seams. I quickly traced my son's head onto the wool and cut 2 pieces, as well as a 4-inch strip to run along the middle of his head to form a hood. I've never sewn a hood before and didn't want to buy a pattern, so I made it up as I went. Here, I am attaching that center strip to one side of the hood, very slowly molding the straight strip to the curved edge of the side piece. I folded over and sewed the button plackets. I then moved on to attaching the sleeves to the arm's eye, right sides together. Once the sleeves were in, I folded the coat right sides together and stitched from hem to cuff in one line, giving extra reinforcement to the armpits. So my coat is finished except for the lining and the buttons and the hemming, of course, on the bottom edge and the hood. I'm going to... Yeah?
I'm gonna get that done after the lining is in. This is going to be the capelet. It is folded in 4 at the moment, and it is a half circle. When it's on him, the opening basically falls where the plackets are right now. And as my assistant is trying to show you, this is the polar fleece that we're going to be using. It's an old blanket that I don't use. And I wanted to avoid going to the store because it is chilly, and this coat is supposed to be for the chilly weather. That's why we're taking 2 days to get this done. So I'm happy I remembered I have this and I could just use that. It's not my choice of color. I was hoping to have a blue lining, but you know what? It's good enough. It's going to be warm. We're happy we don't have to go out to buy something.
Through much stomping and many interruptions, I managed to trace and cut the lining pieces. My assistant was once again glued to my lap as I stitched the lining together in the same order as I stitched the wool. The lining was put together in about 3 minutes. I then had to pause sewing until evening as the baby was sick again. After the hood was attached, I pinned the lining into the coat and hand sewed it along the button placket. The hood lining was also secured down.
Last night I finished stitching the lining onto the button plackets on both sides, and this morning I've gone and trimmed down the hem to the length I want it and then rolled it up. Keep in mind that I did cut this extra long so that next year as my toddler grows I can let it down little by little. The same thing with the sleeves. And there's enough room going around that that's not a worry for a while. Now this is, because of the way I rolled it and all the extra fabric in there, this is 3 layers of the wool fabric plus the layer of the fleece lining. So she is much too thick for my sewing machine. I'm going to spend the next hour or so felling that down by hand and then pressing it and doing a very long top stitch at the bottom here, just to give it a nice crisp line from the outside. And while I'm stitching this down, I think I'm going to indulge in an episode of Murdoch Mysteries.
The hem was completed in less than 1 episode of Murdoch Mysteries. Yay for uninterrupted hand stitching while the baby is napping. Next, I used the last of my wool twill tape from my walking skirt hem to put a nice edge on the hood. I first used the machine to attach the tape on the inside of the hood before folding it over the raw edge and whip stitching it to the outside. Next, I stitched a long strip of non-bias tape around the cape to seal the raw edges away. I picked these lovely red wooden buttons from my button stash and attached 6 onto the right side of the coat and 2 buttons onto the neck of the cape. I did this at 2 a.m. as I needed the coat to be finished for the next day. At a more reasonable time in the morning, I used my machine to make the 6 buttonholes. I did not have time to do them by hand as I wanted. Maybe in the future I can go over them with silk buttonhole thread. This, however, will have to do for now. I had some plain gray wool twill tape in my stash that I've gone ahead and folded in half and sewn down into this flat bow where I will put the buttons through the bow holes here to secure the cape shut. And this way I don't have to worry about a string being tied around his neck or any extra holes in the coat or anything. It's just 2 simple buttons at the neck of the cape that are held in place with a little bow. And here is the final result. I love how it fits him and how deep the hood is. Hopefully it will keep him warm on the few short outings we take this winter. We finished the coat just in time for the first snow of the year.